Hi, I'm Walter, I'm the Dutch Mentor. Welcome back to the Smart Performance Podcast, where S stands for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive problem solving, R for rhythmic operation, of course, T for building a thriving community, and P for performance. I'm really happy to have Jason with me today. We're going to have a talk around self-awareness. Now, I know that we have spoken about this in the past, and we'll do it again in the future. Why is it so important? Because that's where the foundation of us lies. We have to start there. And only through that, breaking ourselves down and having a deeper understanding of ourselves can we continue to grow. So, Jason, thank you very much for joining me today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I am very much in the behavioral psychology realm and have built some AI around that to help leaders make better people decisions. Prior to this current venture, I headed up a company called Champion National Security and helped scale that over my 7-year period there. We had a successful exit. And a lot of that was because of me, and a lot of it was in spite of me. I had a lot to learn as a leader. I made a lot of mistakes. In that period of time, I got to meet Dr. Brene Brown and get trained by her, which was really, I'd say, epic. And that's part of the self-awareness journey of myself and what makes me so passionate about it.
Excellent. Listen, we don't. If you don't learn about self and you don't learn from your mistakes, then self-awareness is in the toilet, so to speak. And Brene Brown is certainly a great example. And as she says so well, it's like we don't need to go at it alone. And too many people let their prides and egos get in the way and never really get to that point of really understanding self and learning from the mistakes that they make along their path. And that's where the greatest growth comes from, of course. So I always start off with asking about a problem. Set the stage, set something about either yourself or somebody you have worked with, or what is the problem that.
I mean, self-awareness, I'm in the B2B world, right? So my clients are mostly founders, CEOs, heads of HR, heads of sales, things like that. And of course, there's a business case for self-awareness because it makes us more attuned to what others need and how we're wired and how all those differences play in. But really, at the end of the day, it's about courage and it's about growth, being the best version of ourselves that we can be. I've never met somebody who, on the way home from work was like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have been so excellent at my job today. So pursuing growth and excellence has never had a downside. But we hear people all the time like that are miserable because they are doing miserable things. So I think kind of digging our way out of that is important for ourselves before it's ever important for our businesses and our ROIs and all the other buzzwords.
The key is if you don't go on that journey, can you still be successful? Of course, right? But have you seen somebody who finally came to the realization that said, "Listen, I need to go onto this journey to not only better myself, but better my team, better my company," and you saw real results coming from that?
Yeah, and I've seen that in myself. Success is often the like most dangerous form of failure. All right, because we define success in a certain way, metrics, profits, etc. But then we're failing in so many other aspects of life. And so I think shifting that mindset, certainly for me, through the 2016 to 2020 time period was my most profound period of self-growth. And now it's just been an ongoing focus since then.
Excellent. So one thing we keep talking about, it is a journey. It's not an overnight, let me read a book and now I'm self-aware. So take us on the journey, what you have experienced for yourself and what it is that you now talk about with your clients or the path you put them on. So what does that journey look like and what steps do they need to take?
Yeah, so most people think that they're self-aware and most people just aren't. And I think it's an incomplete understanding of self-awareness. Most people, when we say, yeah, I'm self-aware, we're really thinking about data, just little bullet points that we could put into a spreadsheet. I do this, I do that, I do this, I do that. But data in a spreadsheet doesn't do anybody any good if the impact of those data points is hurting people, hurting ourselves, hurting our businesses. So the biggest part of the journey is moving from just the data piece to the impact piece. How are my behaviors impacting the people around me? And for myself, one example, I would always recognize, I tend to be kind of a dominant force in a room. I'll steamroll my team sometimes. And by team, I mean my executive team. And that was just data. That wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping anybody. And when I realized the impact of steamrolling is that my team feels like they don't have a voice. They don't feel valued by me. They don't feel like they can contribute and make this thing better than it is right now. So it's just the Jason show. And the Jason show is a failing, just, inevitable path of destruction if left to just myself. And so when I started seeing that impact, that's what started really pushing me through the rest of the self-awareness journey.
So interesting, right? It is that you have to be vulnerable in order to be
Oh,
open
yeah.
yourself up, and that is really difficult to do. And I keep saying this, and it's not about it being sexist, but men have much more greater difficulty opening up and being vulnerable, and understanding that pride and ego gets in the way of many things, and women have this uncanny ability to do that at a much more intense level, and real growth comes from that. And I've seen in the workplace sometimes that men are left behind because they're not willing to go into that journey. As I always talk about in the podcast series that I have here, is that we need to be actionable, right? It's good to listen to you. It's really interesting to hear your story. But on the end of the day, if I don't do something with this information on a day-to-day basis, really we fall short. And as a behavioral specialist, as I am, we all know that we love to do things for 2 or 3 days in a row, maybe a second week, but by the third week, we move on to the next thing, and we don't really make any real changes. So take me on that path on what is something, 1 or 2 things that people can start doing today to start raising that self-awareness and start, really become the person that they would like to be for their team and for their really at home and for the families as well.
Yeah, I love that emphasis on action. And moving through self-awareness requires action upon action upon action. Because once we see that impact that we're having and it doesn't match our intention, we have to change behavior. And changing behavior is tough because we have these neural pathways that have been set in, and we have to break those patterns and shift into a different pattern. The wrong way to do that is to ask, why am I like this? Because that results in identity statements. Oh, I'm just a bad leader, I'm an a-hole, whatever it might result in. But we can shift that to say, what's driving the behavior? We're not coming up with excuses. It doesn't make the behavior okay, but it's understanding what the underlying drives and needs are that we're fulfilling in ourselves. And so if I'm steamrolling, if I just want to be in charge, that's this drive to shape my world. I'm driven to shape outcomes and direction and people and events. And not everybody is. In fact, statistically, most people aren't. Most people would rather be a team player and kind of sit behind the scenes. Well, that drive doesn't just have one way to be filled, right? Steamrolling my team is not the only way to fulfill the drive to make an impact. In fact, it's ridiculous when you say it out loud. So what I have to do, what your listeners, if you're on this journey with me, figure out what that drive is, and then just simply come up with behaviors that are going to lead to better outcomes, better impact, but that still fulfill those drives and needs. It's not easy, but it is actually kind of simple, because if I can figure out what that behavior looks like, and I can do it, and I can do it again, and I can really commit, then eventually those old neural pathways start to weaken, and the new ones that I'm trying to put into place start to take root and actually become the new pattern over time.
Absolutely. So give me a concrete example, something that people can relate to in realistic terms.
Yeah. So my desire to, and my need, drive to make an impact, to set the direction. Ultimately, that means I want to win. And if I want to win, then it needs to have, I need to have the greatest outcome for my business. And that's not going to happen if it's only Jason's ideas. And this is all obvious stuff, right? So a behavior became, okay, now when I'm doing my meetings, when I'm doing my quarterly retreats with my executive team, I started doing very intentional activities beforehand so I could garner feedback from the quieter voices in the room. I started doing activities in those meetings, something called the turn and burn, for example. I ask a question and I say, all right, you have an index card, write down your thoughts. Because sometimes it's just the loudest voice that wins, right? So, hey, write down your thoughts and let's turn those in, let's read them. Little things like that, little micro behaviors ultimately resulted in a team that now had a louder voice and they had more input. And what did that result in? Better outcomes, of course, right? Because now we have all the best ideas on the table and the best idea wins. It doesn't have to be Jason's idea. So these are not earth shattering, big, massive behavioral shifts. They're little micro things that we can do in our day to day that, again, over time compound and become new patterns.
Yeah, it is leading with the solution in mind from the leader who sets the vision is really the the part that people need to undo, right? Need to unlearn is that they need to resist that temptation and sit on their hands and put something over their mouth and just be there and allow people around them, and of course give that voice to that introvert who otherwise will not raise their hand, because often the best ideas come right from that group of people. So that's really good. Is there a formula? Is there a process? Is there something that you have developed that really is helpful for people to do? Or did you have something on your website? You said you generated some AI tools that people can utilize in order to get that first step and start finding some solutions for themselves?
Well, our solution really is B2B. So we're working with organizations, and organizations and the leaders within are very much using our tool for that. There's a behavioral assessment that leads into a behavioral intelligence and AI for coaching and personal growth and even mental health companionship. But it's not really accessible to the consumer. So, best idea is to hit me up on like LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to take that assessment. And I can give, a link out there that lets you kind of preview the AI and maybe get started. But even without an official scientifically validated tool, there's lots of great like assessments and personality things out there that can help you start diving into what those drives are. Now, personality and drives aren't the same, of course, but they're still helpful. I mean, even knowing which Hogwarts house you are can be a helpful step in like understanding kind of how you're wired.
So give me a case presentation of a person, give it a fictitious name, on where they started, how they went through the process, and what the outcome is. Again, tangibility is something that's important for the listener. Why would I buy into this if I don't quite understand the outcome of that?
Yeah, one of the most potent examples. So clients come to us because the biggest ROI is on the hiring side. If we put the right people in the right seat, game over. We're winning. But it's all of this personal growth and self-awareness that comes as a byproduct that really is the most transformative. And I've got a client who we went through a half day, almost full day of training in person, going through what we're measuring and what all this stuff means. And the self-awareness piece is important. Just as important was understanding how differently other people are wired. And so this guy, I'll call him Ryan. Ryan started the day saying, I really can't stand my employees. And he ended the day with, wow, they're just driven by, motivated by complete opposite drivers. And if I'm the leader, it's my job then to treat them and lead them the way they want to be led. I've been expecting and wishing that they would just meet me where I am, and my speed and my vision and whatever else, but that's just not going to happen. And it's not up to them, my employees on a payroll, to meet me where I am. I'm the leader. It's my business. I'm bought in here. I need to be adjusting my style to, best care for these folks.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And of course, as timing always has, the landscaper shows up, so I need to go for a little walk. But that's all good. Listen, I think that the component of self-awareness and behavior is something that's still very foreign to most people, and they call this the soft stuff, right? But as I talk about the four key responsibilities, and it started off with loving the people that you lead. The key that I learned a long time ago, and that somebody told me, Walter, sit down, shut up, relate, don't compare. And once you understand the difference between relating and comparing to somebody, I think that was a real breakthrough. And it's no different as a leader. When I used to have group meetings with even with the people at the what they say, let's say in the basement, right? The support staff at the hospital, critically important roles in order to make sure that the hospital functions, sitting around the table and giving everybody an opportunity to tell a little bit about themselves with the mindset of, listen, we're here to learn, to share, and to relate. And really that, powerful self-awareness comes around the table that, listen, on the end of the day, you might come from different parts of the world, but there are many things that we share and we have in common. And once people learn to relate to each other, it's much easier to communicate with them. It's much easier for them to share information and insights with you as well. Jason, thank you very much for that. It was insightful information. Where can we find you?
LinkedIn's probably the best place, and it's whatever the URL is, and then / Jason P. Carroll, P as in Papa, 2 R's, 2 L's, or Aptive Index. It's a made-up word, APTIVE. Aptive Index is the company, and you'll find me if you're finding Aptive Index. That's the best way to connect.
Okay. And I would love to, since you had the opportunity to work with Brene Brown for some time, give me a parting thought or something that is really powerful that stuck with you that came from through her mentorship.
I mean, that's a 4-hour conversation, but I'm going to tie back to something you.
I knew you were going to say that. So
I'm going to actually. It's not the most profound thing in the world, but I'm going to tie back to something you said earlier about men and the differences in how we approach emotions and vulnerability and things like shame. That's never been so visually clear as when I walked into that room of about 120 people from all around the world to get trained by Brene Brown for 3 full days. And I was one of 8 dudes. 120 people, and there were 8 of us men. That should tell you something. We have some work to do, man.
Hey, listen, the statistics screams out loud that it's okay to say, I need a little bit of help. Right? And
Yeah.
I remind everybody that nobody went to the Olympics without having a good coach or mentor. Right? And I still see it in my own work is that the majority of my clients are female. And it's a shame because, men need this more often than the women do. It's just a matter of lowering that threshold and swallow a little pride and ego and actually sit down and learn and grow and develop because the outcomes are not just better at work, but it's also better at home. Right? It is really all the things that we talk about are very translatable to being a better father, being a better husband, being a better brother, so to speak. Jason, thank you very much for joining me on the show today. It's very valuable, very insightful, and I hope that at least 1 or 2 of you will actually take meaningful action to reach out to Jason, reach out to myself, but do something with this information that will allow you to get a better insight of who you are as a person, who you are as a leader. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to break down and to build something back. So again, Jason, thank you very much for joining me today. Take action, and we'll see you in the next episode, everybody. Take care.